here we go. I'll show you how I do it. I've already loaded in some mocap. I've already loaded in the rig. There's a ground plane in here. It's all doing standard stuff. Using the Maya rigs, which you get out of the content browser just in case you didn't even bother to watch the first one. That's cool. It's all in here. You just right-click, import, and in comes a rig. Since they're all human IK, the ones that come with Maya, you can basically just assign mocap. Like this, I downloaded this thing off the net. And if I go to the animation human IK interface, it's very easy to just pick the rig that we brought in from Maya, which is this Antonia thing, and then switch the source from a control rig to a whatever the mocap was. It's called humanoid in this thing. And then it locks up like that. I can turn off the display for the joints and look at what this lady does now. That's creepy, but there it is. So if I want to put nCloth on this, it's not rocket science. I basically just select the mesh, go into effects, create nCloth, boink, and then I'll add the same function basically to the ground, except I'll create passive collider. And now these are both nCloth, and we can simulate it. The problem is, if we simulate it right now, straight up, it's just going to overtake whatever animation we had going into it. And you can see also it's simulating very slowly because the scale is huge. So I'm going to go back to the start. I'm going to select her skin, go to the attributes, and we're going to do a couple of things here. First, let's first adjust the scale, right? So the scale issue, if you go into the nucleus, you can turn down the space scale 0.02. This ratio will allow for this sort of speedier resolution of the cloth. So if I play now, you see that it'll fall quicker. And you can play with that scale however you want. There's some real world settings that have to do with your global scale and all that stuff. I don't know any of that. I'm no nCloth expert. I'm just having fun. So I play with the scale until it looks good. And this is probably about right for me. So she melts. That's funny. Good. Now I'm going to go and select her again, go to the attributes, and in here we're going to crank up this input mesh attract. This is the magic. This takes the place of all those constraints and wraps and things like that. So if I put that up to 1 and then switch on lock values of 1 or greater, we get this basically mocap full effect back onto the mesh. It essentially overrides any nCloth. And because we have that locking set, that basically kills any solving that the nCloth tries to do. The magic is we can basically keyframe this attribute. So like, let's say she's walking along, and then when she starts to tumble here, like right here, she's going to switch to nCloth, right? So we select her, go to the attribute editor again, and input attract mesh. Let's set it to 0 right there. That's where she transitions. Or actually, let's do it on frame 51. That's where she transitions. She becomes nCloth completely. Set key. And then I'm going to select the nCloth shape node here so we see the keyframes. And if I go back to like frame, I don't know, let's see, say 46, and put the input mesh attract all the way back up to 1. So that's where she starts to turn into nCloth, and she transitions, and then she's fully nCloth by frame 51. So let's see what happens. Oh, and one other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use polygon shells. This is basically her eyeballs and her teeth and all that stuff. They're separate groups of polygons. They're separate from the actual skin mesh, even though they're all combined into one node. But if I use this, it will solve them separately. So funny things can happen, like they could pop out of her head or something. So then I play it, and you'll see right as it gets to frame 46 here, it will slow down as it tries to solve. So here we go. Right now it's starting to solve, and then frame 51, she's all nCloth. She just collapses. Bloop. So not the best look, but it's a start, and this is what we can start playing with. So I can go in and do what I usually do, which is to crank up the pressure. So I'll switch this to volume tracking and put a start pressure of like 2. Makes her puff out like a balloon. And I dampen that a tiny bit, 0.2. And then let's play that. walk, walk, walk. And then tumble and switch to nCloth slowly. She puffs out. Boink. Yeah, that's fun. There's a couple other things we'll want to tweak. Like if I scroll over here, rotate down, tumble down, you can see that she's kind of hovering above the ground. That collision is not very accurate. And this is because the default collision distance is sort of, it's like a bounding box. So we can tweak that here under collisions for the ground plane. We can switch the thickness down to like 0.1. That'll get the mesh flush. So if I go back and simulate this again, here she goes, she starts to tumble, and here it goes. So now you can see it's really flush with the ground, which is pretty good. Cool. You can do other things, you know, you can play with like the friction on the ground, and here you can see one of her eyeballs popped out, or both of them did, they all popped out. We can play with the timing of when she turns into nCloth, right? So I can go back to the attributes here, select the cloth shape, and let's say we drag this out a bit longer. Let's say it actually starts when she comes back up. Here we go. So that's crazy stuff. Now, there's other things going on that are problematic, and you can decide if you want to fix them or not. A lot of the times, I just don't even bother. To me, this is all fun. I like the way it looks. It's crazy. But if you want to keep the integrity of the model more, you can crank up all kinds of quality settings. And you can also change how it solves the collisions. Like, you can switch self-collision flag. You can switch that to vertex face or even full surface or something like that. And it'll solve much more cleanly. Like, you won't get as much interpenetration, arms going through the body and things like that. However, it will go much slower. Like, it'll solve a lot slower. You'll be waiting for it. The other thing you can do is you can go into the actual quality settings here, and you can just increase the number of, you know, max self-collide iterations and regular iterations. You can go to the nucleus, and you can change the number of substeps. That can also help. And basically, you can tweak a million other possibilities. Get rid of stretching, get rid of bending, things like that. Whatever you want to do. But the main thing is now you see how you create this funny effect. And I'll show you one more thing before I bow out. Basically, you can also do some crazy stuff with painting weights when you use the input, whatever you call it. What's that attribute again? Let me see. I forget what it's called. It's the the input mesh attract, right? So when we paint input mesh attract attributes onto the vertices, you can have all kinds of variety happening here. So for example, let's go down to paint. Where is it? Paint. And then we'll go to the, I'm holding down the right mouse button, by the way, to get this marking menu. We can go to nCloth vertex maps, and I can go to input attract. And then if I double click on this, this is what I'm using right here. If I double click on this, it'll bring up the attributes for it. And I'm going to switch it to replace. And this value is basically, when it's white like this, it's all set to 1, which is input mesh attract value 1. So if we drop this down and replace, we could replace like her hands, for example. Let's paint them slightly darker. So they're not 1, they're 0.0971. Oops. So I'll just paint, you know, it doesn't have to be beautiful, and then I'll flood smooth it a little bit so it's not quite so sketchy. And now you'll see as I start up the playback here, those will start simulating immediately because they're not 1. They're set to a floating value. So she's got like gorilla arms or something, and they squish against the ground, which is kind of fun. And then they go completely nuts. Yeah, that's freaky. Oh, this is a good one. So, oh my God. I would probably do a few things to clean this up. Like I'm going to do some stuff where I increase the number of iterations and maybe put some dampening on this. But generally speaking, this is all set. Like we could light this and render it because this is the final model. We haven't used any proxies. It's ready to go. So there you have it. That's how I do this. Thanks very much. Bye.